Welcome back to Personal Prayer Power. This is the final session in this series, and we'll finish up by finding out how prayer can create joy and gratefulness. Before we talk about joy, we need to address the opposite of joy, prayer and depression. Some of us may be struggling with life problems that make feeling good nearly impossible. From time to time, we all experience depression, and when we can't feel positive emotions, we can't feel God's presence. Feeling depressed is not a religious shortcoming. Losses are depressing. Depression is a natural process triggered by a number of inner and outer causes. If we're depressed, there's hope. We can get better. I urge any of us who think we might be depressed to seek help immediately. We can't fight depression alone. We need doctors, counselors, medication, God's help, and the support of family and friends. Although my mother was an incredibly strong believer, she became depressed. She had medical tests, and when they turned out negative, she became very upset. She told the doctor, "If there's nothing physically wrong with me, that must mean I'm having a mental breakdown. There's this dark tunnel in front of me, and I don't want to go down that dark way." The doctor said gently, "I don't know what dark way you think you have to go down, but I do know this. Wherever you go, God will go with you." Mom began seeing a therapist, and she went on medication. Mom said, "When you're depressed, it feels like your prayers get stuck and don't go any higher than the ceiling." But then she added, "But even when I feel that way, I still pray." People who suffer from depression are the most faith-filled people on the planet because they pray even though they feel cut off from God and unworthy of His attention. On the cross, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In His hour of agony, the Lord of all life experienced deep depression. Yet, as Jesus died, He prayed again, this time saying, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He pictured His spirit being placed in God's hands. When we're depressed, we too can cling to God using prayer language just like Jesus did. We can pray using body language, such as tears or through visual images and symbols. Mom used symbols. The front and side of her refrigerator were covered with magnets of butterflies, crosses, and Bible verses. Mom's Bible was always on the coffee table so she could hold it in her hands when she couldn't feel God. She kept the bookmark on promises of hope. She read them over and over again. Using symbols helped Mom live a prayerful life despite her times of depression. Such prayers operate on the other side of existence. The fact that we're praying at all communicates powerfully, "Father, into your hands I commit my broken spirit." Now that we've talked about the special circumstances surrounding depression and prayer, let's talk about the normal, everyday ways we can make thanksgiving and praise real in our lives. Giving thanks seems like it should come naturally. Good things happen and we're glad, but bad things happen too. I'll be honest, there are days when I thank God because I'm supposed to, but my heart's not in it. It's more like a ritual or a duty that has to be checked off the list. Let me tell you about the day I should have won an Academy Award for acting more grateful than I really felt. I was at a fiesta to celebrate the end of our mission trip to a remote village in Honduras. A shy woman held out a crinkled-up plastic bag to me. I looked into the woman's eyes, embarrassed that I didn't remember her name. I opened the bag and found this cloth. It's obviously handmade. Maybe it was a child's school project. Looking at this, you can almost imagine the home it used to hang in. Most of the homes in the village have a few small rooms. The women build fires and clay ovens. Some of the homes don't have electricity. Some have packed dirt floors. No one has a flush toilet. They use water from cisterns to cook and bathe and wash clothes. Maybe this cloth was one of the few decorations the woman had. Knowing these things, I understood that I should be extremely thankful for this cloth, so I acted the part. I smiled and said, "Muchas gracias." Then I waved Gordon over to take my picture with the woman. As Gordon snapped my picture, I wasn't feeling thankful. I was feeling guilty, uncomfortable, and outgiven. I wondered, what can I give this woman in return? I motioned for the woman to wait there, and I hurried over to my backpack and found a pair of suede work gloves that I'd hardly gotten dirty. I pulled them out and gave them to the woman. On the long bus ride back to the ranch where we were staying, I tried to rationalize my feelings about the gift. Since the woman had given me a gift and I'd given her one, it could be considered a fair exchange, and maybe the cloth was her way of paying us for the work we'd done in the village. This story points out that we can understand in our minds that we should be grateful, and we can say and do things that are expected even when we hardly feel it at all. It's all business transactions, politeness, and fair exchange. Isaiah says it's possible to act the same way toward God. Isaiah says, "They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." We can praise and thank God with faraway hearts. Our praise is a polite duty, nothing more than ritual. Yet our hearts need and long for so much more. Back at the ranch in Honduras, another mission team member said, "I want to show you something." She opened up a bag saying, "The children in the village want us to take these gifts back to the children at our church." I went, when I saw what was in that bag. Here it is. These are the treasures of an entire village of children. There must be 40 things here. Little straw hats, crocheted pot holders, painted gourds, pictures colored just a long time ago because the paper's already yellowed. This small angel frame must have been the most beautiful thing the child ever had. Giving any one of these gifts would be like our children stripping their rooms bare. We put the gifts into an old suitcase, and the first night back home, as I lay in my clean bed with the air conditioning running, I thought about the dusty suitcase in my closet. I wished I could fly back and give every precious thing back to the children, but I couldn't. The next morning, I knelt down and opened the suitcase on the den carpet. I took out each item one by one and listed them with each child's name in my journal. It took up 4 whole notebook pages. As I surveyed the items spread across the carpet, a tear came out of my eye and dropped all the way in my lap as I thought, how God must love these children. Suddenly I wasn't simply seeing little straw hats and crayon pictures. I was experiencing how God loves us and gives us so much more than we will ever deserve or could ever repay in 1,000 lifetimes. I wondered how a busy adult like me, with so many things I take for granted, could be like the village children whose hearts were never far away from God. A Bible verse came to mind, but Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. I wondered, is it different to ponder things in our hearts instead of in our minds? The word ponder means to meditate and reflect. These are prayerful activities. They require quiet time and deliberation. Meditation is the opposite of our modern routines where we're driven to produce things and rush places. Yet treasuring things in our hearts is the only way for praise and thanksgiving to become emotionally real. These gifts are very real examples of sacrificial love that can be seen with our eyes and held in our hands. John 13 says that when Jesus washed the disciples' feet, he was an example. It says, having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. Jesus' example wasn't meant just to touch our intellects. Its purpose was to touch our hearts. Jesus doesn't want us to simply copy his deeds. He wants us to copy his loving heart. Jesus couldn't possibly explain his whole love to us. His love is so big and so incredible, no one will ever be able to grasp it. Such love can only be shown and felt through example. Words of love can't prove love the way a single act of love can. Our hearts are so easily touched by examples that even made-up stories and books and movies can move us to laughter, joy, or tears. Experiencing examples is the only way to glimpse things like love, splendor, holiness, and glory. We feel these things by appreciating the everyday examples of God's amazing qualities that surround us. Praise, thanksgiving, and gratefulness are activities, not strings of religious words. Activities involve grasping things through all of our senses. The Bible says, I sing for joy at the work of your hands. It doesn't say we sing for joy when we read theological words about God. Instead, we rejoice over God's works, His deeds, and His creative power. I was missing that feeling of gratefulness during my prayer time because I'd been doing things the wrong way. I'd been shutting my eyes and relying on words. I jump-started my praise time by going out the back door and looking for small examples of God's magnificence. I ran into it right in the middle of the path through the woods. It was a spider web that was outlined with tiny silver drops of dew. It made me think about invisible threads of my life that fit together into a well-planned pattern, and I thanked God for the goodness of His detailed plans. The next morning I saw tiny green blackberries, and I thanked God for how He helps us grow and mature. And the day after that, when the leaves were still dripping from rain, I smelled the damp soil and thanked God for His cleansing and renewing power. I found that if we look carefully enough, we can see, smell, taste, hear, and touch examples of God's power, unconditional love, intelligence, glory, magnificence, forgiveness, and justice. We can sense God's wisdom, mercy, generosity, patience, healing power, and goodness. And we can feel God's trustworthiness, timelessness, grace, creative power, and holiness. In John 16, Jesus says, I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy. Rejoice means to be literally filled with joy. How wonderful to imagine a kind of joy that can't be taken away. The reason it can't be stolen is because it isn't about what we have or about what happens to us. This everlasting joy is about who God is and who we are in relation to Him through Jesus. No power on earth can strip away the example of God's presence. Who could shake the morning dew off all the spider webs or steal the fresh smell of the earth after the rain? As we conclude this session on our hearts in prayer, Jesus sums up what we've learned by saying, For where your treasure is, there will your hearts be also. Our hearts get filled up with whatever we treasure. Creating a daily place and time where we learn to recognize and treasure examples of the spiritual riches of heaven is one of the most rewarding acts of prayer. On the road to Emmaus, 2 disciples discovered that their hearts recognized Jesus long before their minds did. They said, Were not our hearts burning within us while He talked with us on the road? Feelings of gratitude and joy warm up our hearts and set them on fire. They overflow with joy, passion, gratitude, excitement, jubilation, vision, possibilities, and hope. Only our hearts can inspire true celebration, love, kindness, bravery, praise, self-sacrifice, and devotion. Our hearts need filling every day. They can't fill themselves up automatically. They remain quiet and inactive and empty inside of us until we stop and open our eyes to examples of God's nearness. And once we begin filling our hearts up with God, we feel the incredible joy that can never be taken away. This week, you'll actively experiment with opening your eyes during praise and thanksgiving to find real examples of God's magnificence. This brings us to the conclusion of our Personal Prayer Power series. I hope it's brought new enthusiasm into your personal prayer time. Prayer is truly the place where things happen between God and me. Revolutionizing our personal prayer times is simple when we learn to let the hand of Jesus work with ours on the steering wheel of our lives. It's been a pleasure and honor sharing with you. May God bless you, and may you find God's amazing answers to each and every prayer.